my name is Talia. Welcome to Talia Nerds Out. Trying something a little bit different today. One of the things that have been difficult for me, one of the things that has been difficult for me, has been the fact that I have been finding it challenging to just get around to setting up a camera to do recording. So I figured, let me try my phone. I do have a new phone. It should have a better camera to make getting video quality better than it would have been on my other phone. So I want to see if this works out okay, and if it does, I might stick to using my phone instead of getting a camera, which doesn't always, or using my camera, which doesn't always connect well with my computer when I'm trying to upload videos. So just gonna do a few quicker videos and go from there. I just have a couple of book reviews that I wanted to do, and then later on I'll have some reviews of, or some books that came in here and there since I last talked to you. But the first book that I want to talk about is going to be a review of Anne of Winning Poplars. So this is the fourth in the Anne series, not the fourth one that she wrote, but fourth in when it occurs. So this is supposed to be taking place right before House of Dreams, which is the next one that I will need to read. This one is taking place the 3 years before Anne is set to marry Gilbert Blythe, and it is mostly in an epistolary form, although there are sections that are written in your more traditional narrative form. This probably was not my favorite of the Anne books. I don't know. There were points that I enjoyed, and certain character interactions that I enjoyed, but I'm not sure if it was the epistolary format or what. I did enjoy the widows she lived with, and their Rebecca Dew, who also lives with them, kind of runs that household. I really enjoyed that household. There seems to be a bit of a pattern that I'm noticing where Anne will run into a kindred spirit, usually someone who's quite young, like a child. Sometimes it'll be an older person, but who will be imaginative in a way that's very similar to her own, which Anne comes off better, I think, if she's more unique. And for her to keep running into these other quirky people who are quirky in the way that she's quirky is just kind of, I don't know. While I enjoy the Anne series, I definitely feel like the first book is head and shoulders above the others that I've read so far. Although all of them have had their, good points and their points that I don't enjoy as much. Except for the first one. The first one I really do enjoy. But I do feel like in this book in particular, just has been a couple of characters where they emphasize the quirkiness. And I mean, she had a couple characters who either used the term that they thought that Anne's soul was like a violet, or she makes her think of violets. There were two completely separate, unrelated characters. It was just kind of, I think it might have been a term that maybe Ellen Montgomery tended to use herself, but it did kind of distract me a little bit because I'm like, wait, these are unrelated characters. There's no reason for them to share this same imagery of Anne. There's nothing about Anne that particularly makes the reader think of violets. This was supposed to be kind of like this, quirky thing. So that is something that I have noticed. Another thing is Anne has multiple times during this book where she runs into the cranky or irritable or unpleasant person who she alone seems to have the ability to win over, and she's able to work her Anne magic on. And I know that grossly simplifies it, and really huge Anne fans would probably take some umbrage with that, and I know my mom did. But I do feel like there are points where Ellen Montgomery kind of gets herself stuck in a bit of a repetitive fashion. When I was discussing Ellen Montgomery's work and compared it with Louisa May Alcott's, I noticed that there are certain characters of Ellen Montgomery's where it just seems like she's kind of like rewriting Anne. Kind of got that same feeling from the Story Girl, for example. But, and like I said, even certain characters, even within the Anne series, they just pull parts of Anne into those other characters. But in comparison to Louisa May Alcott, my mom and I discussed the characters in the Rose and Bloom duology. So that's 8 Cousins and Rose and Bloom. And then compared it to the characters from Little Women, Little Men. And I think there might be one other one in that series. I haven't read anything but Little Women. But we took in particular Little Women and I think we did Little Women 8 Cousins, because at that particular time, those characters are all of an age. They all kind of like stair-step each other in ages, which is kind of cool because then it gives you an idea of, okay, do these characters kind of overlap a lot, or do they have really their own mark that's really unique to them? And Louisa May Alcott did a really good job within those 2 series of creating very distinct voices. I wouldn't mistake Mac for Charlie for I don't know, my brain just died. Mac, Charlie, Lori. Wouldn't mix any of the boys up. Steve, I don't know why I'm not remembering the oldest boy's name right now, because I really like him too. But anyway, even though they're all kind of an age right there, but neither would I feel like the girls have overlapping voices. Jo is different, of course, from Meg and Amy and Beth, but I feel that Phoebe and Rose are also very different from them. And we could sort of, in our heads, play scenarios where these characters could interact and have develop these relationships, but also have their spats based off their personalities, because they do have characteristics that I do feel, and both my mom agreed, they felt very different from each other. So I think to a certain extent, Louisa May Alcott is perhaps better at making different character voices than Ellen Montgomery was. I kind of feel that Ellen Montgomery might have been herself very much Anne, and she just kind of liked that character type. And it does feel like some of her other female characters aren't as well sketched. Now, there are ones who are very well sketched, but like, I even feel to a certain extent, if you were to ask me like what Diana Barry is really like, but divorce her from Anne, I'm not sure if I could say, oh, Diana is like X. I mean, you kind of can, but she's kind of bland on her own because everything is kind of tied up in Anne. Now, to be fair, if I was to go and take Phil from what is it, Anne of the Island? I think it's Anne of the Island. She very much can stand on her own and has a very distinct personality in a way that Stella and their other roommate didn't have. So Ellen Montgomery kind of is a little bit more hit and miss for her characters having their own unique voice to them. So that's probably my biggest issue. And this came out most strong. I kind of was already noticing some of the issue with how I felt the characterizations, how well the characterizations were done in the previous handbook, particularly when I'm looking at people like Stella and the other roommate who's not Phil. But this kind of solidified that view for me. And while she does have characters that are sketched out well, like to use example, I think there's a character named Catherine here, but there's another character who feels similar, who also is kind of gives us some pleasant feel. She's the one, I don't want to give too much detail, but she's the one at one point who her younger, prettier sister is getting married, and she kind of gives this unpleasant feeling to everyone around her, kind of standoffish, cranky, that kind of thing, unpleasant. They kind of have some of the same feel to them. Now you could argue, these two characters could have even potentially known each other. Maybe they fed off of each other. But Catherine doesn't socialize, and she's not from there originally. She's a transplant. She came there to teach. So that doesn't really hold as well. So yeah, I did have some definite issues with Ellen Montgomery's skill with characterization. Anne's very well drawn. The original book was very well drawn. As much as I have gripes about Diana, most of my gripes with Diana come as she grows up. After the first book, I felt like it was really hard to get a feel of her. To be fair, we kind of leave Diana behind after a certain point. At least we have so far. So once she starts building her family, she seems to be stepping out of the narrative. But after the first book, I don't know, I just really found Diana hard to connect with, even though I didn't connect with her really terribly much in the first book. But she was easier in the first book to connect with. But for the most part, in the first book, the characters were very well drawn, and Matthew and Marilla actually, most of the characters from the original book stayed very well drawn. It seems to be the characters in subsequent books that I'm having issues with, and some of her friends from Queens. So yeah, those are my basic beefs with this book. But like I said, I did enjoy the people who lived at Spooks Lane, Wendy Poplars. So I would have been perfectly happy even just with them. I really enjoyed their characters. They didn't give me the feel of just sort of rehashing other characters. And if she was rehashing character type, she hit it well enough that I didn't notice it. Now, I probably just made every Anne fan like super annoyed, but yeah, that's just my opinion on Anne of Wendy Poplars. If you enjoy reading Anne and you enjoyed the other books in the Anne series, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't enjoy this one. Anne, past the first one, just hasn't been necessarily my favorite series, but it's not one that, I think I might reread some of the other ones, but I won't ever visit them as much as I do Anne of Green Gables. Now, Mom says that, I believe she said House of Dreams is one of her favorite ones. So that is my next one. I am taking a bit of a break because she's taking a break on Austen. We'll be starting up after Christmas because she's supposed to get a box set of Jane Austen, and we were planning to start reading the next one that she's going to be reading in Austen, actually together, in the same way that I am currently reading To Kill a Mockingbird with my book club, which is we read a chapter literally in the same room together aloud and then discuss as we read. So we're going to do the same thing when we go to the next book, which for her is Mansfield Park, because Anne is a quick read. Even when this, honestly, I could have finished this a lot quicker if I had put my mind to it. So the Anne books I will continue to read on my own schedule, but my mom's just finished. She finished Lady Susan. She finished Sense and Sensibility. Oh, Northanger Abbey, Sense and Sensibility, and Pride and Prejudice. We've had some interesting discussions. She doesn't love the culture of the time. I do think that she has gotten to the point where she's able to admit more depth to it, which kind of makes me laugh at her complaints about it. Her set mind against it had something more to do with, like, she was like, oh, this is just about romance. And I'm like, you read Anne of Green Gables. Like, how is that even an argument? Honestly, I think her issue was that she just didn't like Emma. But we're going to read the next one when she gets her set together, and that's Mansfield Park, which I actually am really glad about because I can see where Mansfield Park might be a bit of a difficult one for someone who has some difficulty with the way that the language is in Austen's work. So I look forward to reading that with her, discussing that with her. We had some really interesting conversations over Pride and Prejudice, so comparing it with Sense and Sensibility and comparing the two villains. Well, spoiler alert, when comparing Wickham and Willoughby. So we did have a lot of fun with that. We've had some discussions about Darcy and just the sisters in general. But yeah, we're looking forward to that. So the Anne series is kind of going on the back burner right now for whenever I feel like, picking it up. I have a couple of other read-alongs I'm doing right now and some other books I want to finish. So I'm not in a hurry to pick up the next Anne, especially since she's currently putting Austen on hold until after Christmas. So thank you very much for joining me for this review of Anne of Windy Poplars. Hopefully this video turns out okay, and that this will be a format that I can normally use because it's a lot easier to set up my phone than it is to get a whole setup going. And for me, with limited energy, sometimes that can be a huge barrier for me to get videos out. So anyway, thank you very much for joining me. Hope that you have a great day. God bless. Bye.